What is up, packers, smackers, and life hackers? Welcome back to the Messy Desk. Today, I want to do something that I think will be helpful to some people because it's a question I get a lot. And whereas the question is not often directly phrased this way, I think it's implying the same general problem. And that implication is, how do I make the Octatrack easier to use? So let's talk about that. So the Octatrack, as you know, is a bit of a beast. And for a lot of people, it feels unconquerable. It feels like there's too much going on. They can't quite get their head around it. They don't even know where to start. And so I've sort of spent some time over the past week working with just the Octatrack, trying to come at it from the perspective of a new user and asking myself, what can I do as a user to make the experience smoother and more easy? Now, before we get into this, I feel like I should say at the front of this video, these are not life hacks. I'm not going to teach you how to unscrew the faceplate of your Octatrack so the outputs only put out Drake type beats, okay? This is more general advice. This is more trying to help you mentally rein yourself in and direct that productively into the Octatrack. And so while my tips are going to refer to things I've talked about in the past that are a little more life hacky or just more hard tips, these are kind of like soft reminders to keep in mind while you're using your Octatrack so that you can take a little bit of that mental strain off you. Because I think it's one thing to be told, here is how to make a tape stop effect. That's fine. But I think it's another thing to keep in mind always some sort of tips for general productivity, but especially tips for productivity when it comes to the Octatrack. So let's get right into it. Number one, use a template. And 1A of that would be use templates. Template projects, I've talked about this in another video. I'll go ahead and put that right there. They're super, super useful for expediting your workflow because rather than opening up a project to 8 static machines, you can open up a project to whatever combination of machines you most regularly use, have scenes ready and waiting for you, or whatever kind of scenes you most commonly use. You can even have samples saved to the track. So you can just go. Cannot recommend templates enough. I have multiple templates. I have this template here, which I go over in that video. I'm not sure which way to point. Let's try this way this time. And that's mainly for using the Octatrack kind of like a thick Digitact with one through machine for some outboard gear. I have another one that I talk about in this video. This way I always win, where I'm resampling outboard gear on the fly and kind of using the Octatrack as a live remixer. If I tried to bring up those templates from scratch every time that I open the Octatrack, I would want to commit ritual seppuku. It's miserable. And I think a lot of people are daunted by this. I, for one, have very little creative will when it comes to screwing around with tediousness. I hate having to unplug and replug in things. I hate having to sort out the routing of things. It is a creative demolisher for me. So just being able to turn on the Octatrack and go is a huge, huge deal. I cannot recommend it enough. It is the first thing that I recommend to every student that takes a lesson with me. Link below, by the way. Number 2, know what your goal is. So this kind of relates to the template in that if you come to the Octatrack and you don't know what it is you're trying to do, you're going to have a rougher time than if you sit down knowing what you have to do. It's just like working in a DAW. If I sat down to work in Ableton and I don't know if I want to mix a track, start a track from scratch, work on sound design, like if I try to split myself between these 3 things, if I try to mix while I sound design and work on a new track from scratch, nothing's going to get done. And then it feels scattered and impossible. Whereas if I come to Ableton thinking, okay, today I'm going to sit and learn the Arturia plugin suite front to back, or I'm going to learn this one soft synth front to back. I know what I'm doing. I know how to achieve those goals. I've set those goals. It is the same way with the Octatrack. While it can be a really exploratory and inspiring device in that regard, I think it's a lot smarter to come to this knowing today I want a live loop. Today, I want to live remix. Today, I just want to use it like a big Digitact with fun live effects, you know? As soon as you know what you're trying to do with it, it's going to get a lot easier. And that's kind of easier said than done, just knowing what you want to do every time, because you might not know. But I think that's the benefit of templates. You just pull up one of your templates, start messing around, And if that doesn't feel right, maybe you try a different template and that works out for you better. For instance, for today's project that I was working on, I knew that I didn't want to mess around with live remixing. I just wanted to use this like a big dig attack and maybe use the dig attack itself to augment with some extra one shots. And it worked out really great for me. It sounds like kind of a minor thing, but it's incredibly, incredibly helpful to just get yourself in the right headspace and tell yourself, today I'm going to try to do this. And you might end up stumbling off into somewhere else, but at least that will come from a place of at least initial determination and productivity. So you have a template file, you know what your goal is. What now? In a previous video, I talked about parts a lot. And while parts can initially seem very daunting, if you watch that video here or here and kind of get your head around what parts are, parts become super flexible, powerful tools to achieve your goals. Because if you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to use the Octatrack like a fat dig attack today. I'm going to have 7 flex machines and a master track. Great. Immediately you can start thinking of parts as parts to your song. Literally parts to your song. You can start thinking part 1 is my intro, part 2 is my verse, part 3 is my chorus, part 4 is my outro. Any combination of those things. And what's cool, and this applies to all songwriting, is that you don't have to write that linearly. You don't have to make your intro first, and then your verse, and then your chorus. Make music non-linearly. Very often, I make what I guess is a verse before anything else, and then from that, it's very easy to reverse engineer an intro. Similarly, once you have a big chorus, it's easier to lead into the outro. So that might proceed more linearly, but you can totally do it in this non-linear way, and it makes the whole process feel a lot less daunting. I would highly, highly recommend learning what parts do, I guess, is another part of this tip. Learn what parts do, watch the video here, and then use them intelligently to achieve whatever goal you may have. Because it doesn't just have to be for parts of a song. I go over that a lot in the video. If you wanted to, you could transition from a sort of large dig attack setup to a live sampling setup just by using parts, just by changing machine assignments. And that could be really cool. So there's a ton of options that you avail yourself to when you learn what parts do. So I would highly, highly recommend learning what they do and applying them liberally to your tracks, because that's going to make all the difference in the world. Number 4. Focus on the broad before the granular. At first blush, this might seem like a rewording of know your goals, but I mean something different here. When I start making music on the Octatrack, when I start making music in general, I don't care about small details. I just don't. I focus on big, heavy details first, and then I worry about all the tiny stuff later. And I catch myself all the time kind of caught in the weeds of like adjusting velocity curves or automation. This is like an Ableton. Or on the Octatrack, worrying about conditional triggers and slide trigs and trigless trigs and trigless locks when I haven't even gotten the bare bones of my song down yet. I would urge you to push yourself when you catch yourself doing that, to stop and ask yourself, are the broad strokes of your song complete yet? If they're not, maybe focus less on the really intense granular aspects like pitching up individual snares or changing velocity per trig, and get the broad part done, because the broad strokes are really going to inform what you want to do with the granular. In this track here, there's a lot of little details going on. I'm going to go ahead and hit play and show you what I mean, but it was a very, very basic beat, just a simple kind of drum and bass boom, da, boom, da, boom, da, before I did any of this other stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and play it, and you'll hear what I mean. So there's a lot of little details going on in there. There's conditional triggers, there's a lot of trigless locks, a lot of parameter locks, some slide trigs. I didn't do any of that until I had the basic pattern of the sample down, the basic drum beat down, until I got the basics out of the way. Because the basics are going to inform where you have all those pockets to do those things. If you're trying to come up with what you want your kick to be doing and how varied you want your kick to be before you even have placed your snares, I mean, it can still work, but you're going to run into instances where, well, okay, maybe you do want a kick there because it would reinforce the snare better, or taking out a kick here because it clashes with the bass, or there's a whole variety of conflicts you can get yourself into. So just generally speaking, a big tip that I give people when working in music in general, especially on the Octatrack, Focus on the broad before you focus on the granular. I take this same tack in my personal life. I married a beautiful broad before I worried about getting all these granular synths. So, follow it in all these regards. It'll really help you out. But what won't help you out, I promise you, is calling your wife a broad. Would not recommend that. I can feel her anger from across the house. That's number 4. And finally, kind of the thesis of my whole Octatrack project, the whole Octadad messy desk theory of the Octatrack is number 5, use the crossfader and scenes for variations, not just for transitions or to apply effects. It's really tempting to put a high pass filter on your scene, hit play, slide over, and now we're back, right? Or a low pass. And we transition. Right? Turnarounds, I call them in my Crossfader video, which is here. This is just a really elaborate plug for every other video I've already made. So that's what we call marketing, baby. What I would urge you to try to do, and you can watch the Crossfader video here for specifics on this, because I really want this video to be kind of short. Use the crossfader to apply effects with like sound design in mind, not just for these simple mute states and switching, from a high pass to a low pass. I don't have a tremendous example in this particular project because I'm not smart. I don't think ahead, but I do have a little bit of one, which is where I'm bit crushing everything, and it can kind of be used as a transition, which I'll show you. But it can also be used just as like a B section. So if I go like, I also have the sample retriggering. So you can see how this could be a B section. And now we're back. So super minor example, but I give some more in-depth examples in the Crossfader video about really using the crossfader and scenes to get the most out of one pattern so that it really alleviates the work that you need to do down the line for other patterns, for performance. It takes your material that you have and it stretches it so that it can remain interesting for a longer stretch of time than it otherwise maybe would. Really, that's like my biggest treatise on the Octatrack is use the crossfader creatively. Push yourself to use it in ways you might not think it's even meant to be used, and you'll end up with some very interesting sonic territory. In general with this device, the big advice I would give is be unafraid. Fear is the mind killer, some nerd said to me, so I will repeat it to you here, and I will leave you with this thought. Yes, the Octatrack seems intimidating. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to understand. There's a lot in it to internalize and to master. But you there, hey, listen. You decide which chunks of that to take at a time. You decide what this machine is going to do. You decide how you're going to use the crossfader, how you're going to use parts. These are things that are up to you. And if you can avail yourself of the kind of baseline knowledge of just how some of these systems work, if you know what the scene crossfader does, if you know what flex machines do, and it's just normal, just like Digitac stuff, you're ready to go. Don't get in your head. Use template files to help you get started quickly. Know what your goal is going in, and you can always adjust this on the fly if you need to. Use parts as tools to achieve what your goal was, whether that be a typical song structure, kind of remixing and flipping a script of what you currently have. It can go a whole variety of ways. Focus on the broad before the granular. Make sure you get your broad strokes done before you start worrying about those little tiny details that 9 out of 10 people may not even notice. And finally, use that crossfader liberally, intelligently, and creatively. These are my 5 tips to make the Octatrack easier. And while they're not typical tips in that I'm not saying, here's how to do a thing, now go do it, I hope that it will remain useful as advice. Dadvice. Octadadvice, if you will. Because these are the things that I wish someone had told me. I spent a lot of time kind of beating my head against various walls with this machine, trying to learn everything at once, trying to integrate everything at once. Would not recommend it. I would recommend being focused, learning what you need to learn to even get it moving at the time, time and worrying about everything else later when you have kind of the mental bandwidth to take that stuff in. And this goes for music making in general. There's so many things that I want to learn how to do, but I've found so much more joy in really focusing in on the things that I want to do, like really practically affect my music making currently, and saving a lot of the stuff for when I feel like I've got that other stuff down. You know, I feel like I've got the thick Digitact side of the Octatrack down. So now I'm messing around with live sampling. I used the Octatrack for 2 years before I thought about touching live sampling. And now here we are, and I'm way out of my depth. I'm a little frustrated, but you know, I know what my goal is and I'm going to work towards it. So anyway, I think that's about it. I want to thank you so much for watching this edition of the Messy Desk and for all the amazing support you've given me. The 1,000 subscriber video special is coming. My wife and I have a special plan, but we needed another pair of headphones to achieve it. So make of that what you will. Editing Octadad's going to come in here and thank my patrons. You guys have been wonderful, and I love you more than a mama dog loves her little puppies. Peace out. Hello, Editing Octadad here. Just want to thank my glorious, beautiful patrons for their ongoing support. In no particular order, I want to thank Stefano, a new patron. Glad to have you on as a beautiful Octababy. I want to thank my friend Mark, Colin, who's taken lessons with me. Colin, you're a real standout guy, and I enjoy your presence heartily. I want to thank Tony, 16 a.m., Toby. I got Tony and Toby up in here. I want to thank Connor, who I almost get confused with Colin all the time. I want to thank Johan, Seb, Niels, Ian, Matthew, Vasily, Null Style, Ghost, Boner, Andrew, and finally, the coolest lady in a cool, cool world. Climate change could not warm her up because she's just so dang cool. The coolest lady in existence, my mom. Thank you, Mom. I want to thank you guys one more time for watching. I appreciate all your support as always, and I will see you guys next week with a brand spanking new video. So, I'm Daniel. This is the Messy Desk. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I love you more than my kids love the deep, deep lore of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Take care, stay safe, stay sane, and I'll see you guys next week. Hugs and kisses. Mwah.